Hey, happy Wednesday, everyone, and welcome back to the I-5 Corridors Traffic Report. Tyson and Alger here, joined by Shane Hoffman. Shane, I think this will be our last one of the year.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could say this is the I-5 Corridors year-end traffic report.
You could. I dressed for the occasion. I kind of did.
Well, one of my favorite things, like when you were in school, is like when you would get like the 3 weeks off for Christmas, and it's a lot
entered that mode.
Yeah, it's a lot of pajamas, and we have a company policy here at the I-5 Corridor. You know what? It's no formal wear from December 19th on. So just. You might have seen it in the company memo.
I never read those.
Yeah, I know.
You're kidding yourself.
How are you doing, man? Happy holidays, Merry Christmas, whatever you celebrate.
All of it.
You're flying back home to Michigan tomorrow?
Not actually Michigan.
Michigan? Where are you going?
Going mom's family in Boston.
Oh, that'll be fun.
My birthplace, and then actually playing like the Pats or something if they weren't so bad.
Yeah.
And then to Chicago a week after that to visit some friends and probably end up watching some football, which is, I didn't realize that the playoff was on New Year's Day this year, not New Year's Eve like the past few years. That caught me off guard and had my friends making fun of me because when I get something wrong, given that like it's kind of my job, I get dumped on.
Dude, it's the worst. Like, for instance, even in a professional setting, like let's say like you host a podcast and you're talking about like when the transfer portal may be open or like whether guys can transfer multiple times within a season, like that stuff, like.
Imagine.
Imagine.
Some podcasts might.
Yeah, hypothetically speaking. Like we get stuff wrong, and it's
less that, it's more like a lack of research.
Right, but yeah. But there's also like the inverse of that where like you'd be like at a party or something, and it's like you get like apologized because the conversation hasn't turned to sports, like you don't quite understand, like you don't quite have the general IQ to hang in a real person conversation.
You know, it's funny you say that though, because I honestly am getting more and more apathetic about sports, and I'm like kind of okay with it.
Yeah.
I know that's a
this is great to hear as I do your year-end performance review.
Yes, right. I'm just so focused on the craft that I've lost sight of the sport.
Exactly.
You know? But no, I don't know if you've noticed that at all, but because you do that for a living to an extent, and then it's like everyone wants to ask you about it, like I kind of don't want to have 6 separate text chains every time like Ducks football's on.
Yeah, I completely understand that, and on like the flip side too, like I understand like whenever like the Ducks have a big game, it's on national TV, I'll get a lot of texts from people who are just watching the game, and like it's I'm the guy that they know that's covering that, and like it's awesome to get those texts and just like, hey, like great game, or Ducks are kicking ass, or whatever. And I feel bad because I respond to like a few of them, but not all of them, because a lot of them come like right at the end of the game too, and it's like we're down
Crunch
on the field, or you'll notice this too, like half the time we don't get cell reception on the field, and then it's like awful. You get back to the booth, and then all of a sudden like the one tweet you tried to send out in the middle of the second quarter, like Bo Nix is sacked. That happened 3 hours ago.
Speaking of Bo Nix, I had a few family friends this year that it would be like, it was like the USC game, and they're on national TV after, it's like week 9. It's like, wow! Exclamation point. Bo Nix! It's like, completing 80% of his passes. Wow! It's like, yeah, dude, he's been doing that. But, not everyone tunes in.
Because you have more family and friends not on the West Coast here.
True.
What was their view of Bo Nix? Was it like... Because like we had talked about like the Bo Nix bias earlier in the year, and like how there was still a lot of like not giving him his flowers because of what he had done previously. Like this year, were they like, oh shit, like you get to cover Bo Nix, like that's cool, or is it still kind of like
it's a little bit of like, holy shit, he's 30 now.
Yeah, which by the way, happy birthday yesterday to former Oregon defensive tackle Casey Rogers. He turned 25.
Right, and we don't talk about that.
2 years older than Bo Nix.
Yeah, but I mean, it's also like Bo Nix is younger than me, which is insane. So I can't really.
I hate to break it to you as you move forward in this profession.
Yes.
From now on, just about every one of those guys is going to be younger than you.
Yeah.
Unless they get like one of those like punters from Australia that maybe did like a couple missions.
Right. I'll lead the next transition.
Yeah.
Let's talk transfer portal, because signing day is tomorrow, and you were saying before we got on...
Signing day is technically today.
Right.
Right, yeah.
Right, sorry. Excuse me.
Yeah. That's the way the sausage is made.
you were kind of saying it doesn't really matter that much. I mean, it seems like it'll be less dramatic than it was last year for Oregon, and I think a lot of that's because, like, the Ducks kind of got what they needed via free agency at this point.
Well, it's funny because obviously the story coming into this week, I mean, coming into today, is the Dante Moore thing. They get a commitment from the former 5-star quarterback, number 2 in the 2021 or 2022 class, who had flipped to UCLA, played, I believe it was 9 games this season for the Bruins.
Some good, some bad.
Yeah, and so when he signed, or when he committed to the Ducks, you can read it up on the corridor. This was like right at the time when UCLA and USC had announced that they're leaving for the Big Ten. There was a lot of questions around the Ducks and like where their standing would be, and then they got Dante Moore to commit to them, and it was like, all right, like the sky's not falling. I think that was the headline. And then 3 months later, he ends up not transferring, but not coming to Oregon. So, but that's kind of like what I mean about like what signing day is now, is like, yeah, like we can make a big deal of all these guys, about the guys who commit even before they sign. We can make a big deal about like half these freshmen who are going to, statistically speaking, a good amount of these guys are going to end up into the portal at some point in their careers moving forward anyway. So it's hard to kind of like look at the early December signing class and viewing it as kind of like that big Christmas gift that I think football fans did every year, of being like, these are the dudes that we're going to know for the next 4 or 5 years. Because especially like a school like Oregon, where they're getting their pick of the transfer portal litter, and you're getting proven commodities. You're going out and getting a Dylan Gabriel. You're getting the Division II Jay Harris, the Division II running back player of the year. It's just, I think the overall impact of signing day, which Oregon has another great class this year, don't get me wrong, and like this is huge for them. I just think it's like a little more like spread out and less concentrated in like the one.
So no cigars this year?
Dude, that's another thing. Like, there's no way he could do cigars this year after like losing to like Washington twice again.
Right. It's like, also, like, who's the 5-star he's gonna flip last minute this year?
Right, and like there's still a good chance that like stuff like that happens. Right. But like we've also seen them be very active in the portal, and Oregon's building a roster that is completely ready for next year already.
Let's talk about that, because we haven't recorded in about 2 weeks because you had COVID, which is is that your third time having it?
Second official time.
I'm still 0 official times, which is unbelievable. I mean, there's no way that that's actually true.
You should go donate blood. Maybe you have.
It's possible.
Maybe you're patient 0.
Yeah. It's.
Do you see yourself as a superhero? Like I know, okay. I know, like we're.
So, I wrote a Dylan Gabriel story, and then he committed like a day or 2 later, because I was very confident. I mean, not that I was doing the sourcing on that necessarily.
Right, but it was.
I was bummed that it didn't get more traction, because I thought putting out early might spark that, but I think actually putting it out early might have dampened the impact it had. Mm-hmm. Either way, we were sitting the last time listening like, hey, this roster could be better everywhere, but like, how can you, when is Dan Lennon going to have better quarterback play? And, you can point to some statistical numbers and still be like, well, is it, is it possible to reach that? But now they've got a guy in Gabriel who, entering Oregon, has a far more impressive resume, and looks better than Bo Nix did when he entered Oregon. So it's like, I know it's only 1 year, but what can they do with him? And to add more, and to see Moore, who said he cared about development, actually follow through on that and go to a school where like he knows he's going to sit, and maybe Gabriel gets hurt, he'll play in some blowouts, and then to be ostensibly the guy for multiple years after that. I mean, this is now a top 3. You would have to say probably top 3 quarterback room in the nation, and so it's just crazy how swiftly it's changed from like, we're like, is Bo Nix ruining Ty Thompson's chances? He's playing the Bo game, Ty's out of there. The whole thing got flipped in 2 weeks.
Oh yeah, I mean, like you could already make the argument that Oregon's 2024 quarterback room is better than its 2023 quarterback room.
I think it's overwhelming.
Yeah, I mean, like I right now I'll say that Bo Nix is better than Dylan Gabriel, but also, as you said, like, things happen when you go to Oregon, and he's going to have a lot of talent around him too. But I mean,
we'll see if things happen, because it's Bo Nix right now carrying that torch.
Right.
And
yeah.
If a similar thing happens for Gabriel, then it's going to be like, well, they can get a quarterback to come from anywhere. But that's why I'm curious, because it seems like there's a lot of things that tugged Gabriel to Oregon, I think, but it's impossible to like point to the Bo Nix story now and not be like, that could be me.
What will be interesting though is just, let's say Gabriel's great, same situation. Like, does this guarantee that Oregon's not going to like take a look at the transfer portal again next year and see who's on the market? I know that like on paper right now it's like, hey, like Dante Moore, like he was probably the most sought after quarterback transfer that wasn't like a plug and play, like this guy's going to be electric like right away sort of thing. Like, but just there's that talent there. But this is also kind of like, this is the same situation like Ty Thompson thought was going to happen with Bo Nix, right? And I'm not comparing the two guys, and Dante actually has like a proven, like has put some film on tape or some play on tape, but like it's just, I would love to have been like a fly on the wall for like what those discussions are like for kind of like the progression route for him.
Yes, I agree.
But I also do think that looking at it from his point of view too, if Dante Moore probably cares about his NFL future. And if he sees that, like, this is the best way for him to develop in that way, and I'm sure he's still getting some NIL money to come here as well, it's like you're still having your bases covered. It's going to put you in an overall better football position, and it's not like you're, like, taking a huge step back in financially or even, like, exposure-wise, because your name is going to be out there a ton as, like, the next guy at Oregon. It's no longer going to be, like, this big question mark surrounding everything.
Absolutely. I think it's important to note, too, that they will have Will Stein back next year, it seems. I mean, I can't imagine at this point. I think there would have been rumblings if he was going to move on.
Yeah, I haven't seen a lot of fire around that.
And that being said, a year from this time, we might be like, oh, Will Stein just took the open blank job or is going to do this. So having that familiarity, it didn't seem like it made a big difference, between the last 2 years, but that'll help, even though it'll be a different quarterback. I think it was easy to kind of nitpick the offense this year, but like all the numbers were insane. Yeah. And then they've so far in the portal, they haven't lost anyone of note to the transfer portal. I think everybody that entered was expected / not a huge casualty in the eyes of many.
Yeah.
But now, they haven't. There's a rumor that the Kansas State transfer is supposed to commit to Oregon, although it's weird that he hasn't yet, Kobe Savage. But everybody else they've gotten the two quarterbacks. They've gotten Bedford, the really experienced offensive guard, and then they got this Jay Harris running back. So they're kind of, I'm going to call it double, triple down on offense at this point. And you're going to talk to Harris's coach and write something about that. The thing with Harris, like he looks huge. They don't need a starter because Whittington and James, like that's a great 1-2 punch. And Harris, I mean, when you play at D2 or a group of 5, like all coaches and scouts say the biggest difference between those levels isn't the skill level players, it's the lines, the trenches. So I don't see it being difficult to project Jay Harris as like a really successful player at Oregon.
Yeah, like I think he can immediately, I mean, I say immediately, like I can study film to that degree. But I think he can slot in as like that third down kind of goal line back. Like he's got that size.
Right, he
like
could just take Jordan James' role from last year.
Yeah, because I also think that Jordan James can just take Bucky Irving's
He looks
role
so good this year. Like he just had gears where he'd hit that I didn't know he had.
I feel like all of these Oregon running backs, like we've just gotten like a little taste of all of them because like I've been putting together a little thing looking back on Bucky Irving's Oregon career, and he had 800-yard rush games in 2 seasons, which is good, but also like I think at one point in Michael James's career he had, I think it was like 11 and 12 games, just like just unreal types of things. But the main reason that happens is like the amount of times he got more than 15 carries in a game was just like so few and far between, and that's kind of the blessing and the curse of Oregon is you do have like a stacked running back core that like this year Noah Whittington would have got a lot more carries if he didn't get hurt. James I thought was the most explosive back they had towards the end of the season. Like
but Bucky didn't look like himself. But I think it's almost a service to these guys because we see that the running backs that are getting taken high in the NFL draft and who are having success have the fresh legs. Yeah. And like Bucky, you look at him, for all he's done, he's relatively fresh, and I could see him. He's probably
I think he's going to be good in the NFL, man.
He reminds me of Jerick McKinnon. Like he almost immediately.
I mean, this is kind of talking about shit that we've already gone through, but like I think he was the most electric Oregon runner that I've covered.
Wow, there you go.
And I didn't, and then I came after with Michael James, Kenyon Barner. Like my first Oregon running back was Royce Freeman. I don't know if like Bucky was like an overall better running back than Royce Freeman. Like Royce had incredible durability and just like the dude rushed for 1,800 yards his sophomore year. Like that's Bucky's career top was 12-20, I think.
Right.
Like that's a substantial difference. But just like in the amount of like just like jaw dropping, like oh, like look at that dude run plays like
We have
Bucky.
to have to dig in like PFF numbers on like missed tackles forced or some of those stats, but like truly every time he touched the ball, except for honestly that last Washington game, that was the only time I would like. The only time I remember him kind of getting bottled up on those jump cuts and stuff, like it's kind of a weird. Like James would shoot out of a cannon. Bucky was like not even overwhelmingly patient, but just kind of would skirt the blocks in a different way, would take these
Right.
other angles, and just super dynamic. And then I hadn't realized he caught like almost 50 passes this last year, which is nuts for running back. I know they weren't like deep shots, right? But swing passes and stuff. And before we move on to some other stuff, Nix is heading out, Bucky's heading out, and Troy Franklin, who now is like the best receiver to ever come through the program, which is crazy because it seems like it was such a quick peak.
I need you to be a quick editor for me because so I'm filling out my I5 thoughts, which will come out before you listen to this, and I'm making a case for Bo Nix, Bucky Irving, and Troy Franklin in each of their own
Right.
Oregon quarterback, Mount Rushmore, running back, Mount Rushmore, and I make a long case for Nix. I make a long case for Irving because like there's been some really good quarterbacks, there's been some really good running backs. And I was thinking of leaving like Franklin's selection just like LOL, just because like it's it's that freaking apparent that like this guy was like the best receiver Oregon's had. Like it's not really maybe there's guys who the fan base like attach themselves more to. Like as you were saying, like it felt like a very quick peak, but also it's a peak that you would expect from an NFL guy.
Well, it's funny too that they hadn't had many 1,000-yard receivers. I've had it in one story like how scarce 1,000-yard receivers are in the school's history, and then he has this record-breaking season. And like Tez Johnson, I should have known, but he's either like right under 1,000 or he's right over 1,000. I think he surpassed it in Washington, if I'm not mistaken. Like he has this dynamic year too, and I think not that it got overshadowed, but I guess my question with those three. Like if you look at the trio, like that's a pretty great trio all time, and I'm wondering how that ends up getting remembered.
Man, the way that Tez, because I mean, like I think people will remember Troy for kind of floating. Like he was like that guy could go up, like locate a ball, and just seem to like kind of stay in the air a little bit longer to just position himself to grab the ball compared to like DBs. Like he's not. I mean, he is fast, but like I was never blown away by like his speed, but it was just like the
few plays though,
right?
Like the USC one,
dude, and it's just like, but it's like he's just smooth out there, Like I wouldn't say that like he's going out and like Megatron and guys.
He's
or
not
just,
a
like,
violent player.
Exactly, he's a very beautiful wide receiver to watch. Whereas like Tez like was just like you get him the ball in a little bit of space and like he was just gone. Like that was. I think that might be one of the better like 1-2 combos like the Ducks have had just in terms of like a deep ball and a guy who can also just take a bow throw and go turn it into something huge.
I think the Ducks will end up adding one, maybe even two more receivers, but I don't think they need to go for the prototypical like, top number one receiver because Tez, I think people don't think of it because of his stature, but he put up numbers that would suggest he's capable of that type of role. And then Holden, like every time that dude caught the ball,
dude, it's just the last play of the Pac-12 title game. Like he was a beast there.
And then Gary Bryant's still there, and then they got Dickey, right? So the Holden my Dickey offense is going to be great next season, I think.
You've been working on that one, haven't you?
I just said it out loud. I thought of it.
It is fascinating though that like Oregon has moved on from good quarterbacks. They've moved on from good running backs. They've moved on from good receivers. I can't remember if they've ever moved on from a generational quarterback, running back, and receiver all in the same era. Like even when they lost Marcus, like that was kind of a transition because that was Royce's freshman year. Like it's
and yet
they might be better next year. I'm oddly more confident about them next season than this season because I don't think either of us thought like this was going to be like this exact season. I think
without treading on some stuff we have later, I think a lot of people, including ourselves, kind of just overlooked Oregon for reasons that I guess made sense in the moment, but
dude, I remember I remember at the start of the year, I was listening to the Pac-12 radio, and Jeff Schwartz was on there, and he was making a point of there's all these people who are picking like Oregon to finish like second or third in the Pac-12, and they're using the offensive line as like an excuse, as like, oh, the Ducks have to replace 4 dudes on that, and he's like, look at the way they've recruited, look at the way like the transfer guys they've brought in, like. That's not going to be the case here at all. Like, this is like, that was the position where they were ready to reload. And I think, obviously we had questions about their defense going into the season. That turned into be a monster for them. That was the biggest question that we had about that team, and it was answered, right?
Well, to put a bow on the transfer portal stuff, in Lanning's 2 seasons now, he's shown that the players he brings into the portal don't just have immediate success, but have like NFL type success. Think about Gonzalez, right? Think about Bucky now. Bo Nix, obviously.
Kyrie Jackson.
Thank you. I knew I was forgetting another obvious one, and I'm still forgetting, I think, a few. I mean, Birch is going to go pro, it sounds like. Jacobs at some point will probably go pro. And so you're going to just have this trust now where I would imagine they add a few more guys, right? Especially probably some defenders. And then they're going to be guys that probably just right away have an impact, like almost everyone they brought in has.
Yeah.
And then that's being said, because you mentioned Jeff Schwartz saying, Oregon second or third. We did our team's draft.
We did. Nice transition, by the way.
Thank you, man.
You're really
picking up the slack today.
You're taking the reins and you're just going with it. Yeah. So at the start of the year, we decided to not do weekly picks because it's a pain in the ass to compile those every week.
And we would not have hit on many of them.
We wouldn't have hit on many of them, and I don't know how many of you guys actually care about them. So we did, in our Pac-12 preview, we picked 6 Pac-12 teams each. We decided that we would put a dinner on it.
Or lunch.
Or lunch. Go figure. It's 1:30 right now. Maybe we could just... anyways. Can we get a little drum roll? I compile the stats. Team Tyson finished the year with 38 wins and 35 losses.
Mr. 500.
Mr. 500, slightly above average. Shane-O, 46 wins, 27 losses, carried by 2 genius picks. He got Washington with his third pick.
Our 5th overall team, which is crazy.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
God. And then you got Arizona, like, at the very bottom.
Thank you. There were some...
I'd like to say I'm proud, but really I'm just devastated. I have to spring for a lunch.
Well, you got Oregon. That was huge. I can't believe, and we'll talk about this, I can't believe I took USC 1 in retrospect. That was a little... I mean, there was logic in the moment, right?
Cam Rising not playing at all, right, I think hurt my...
You took Oregon and then Utah.
Correct.
I took USC and then Oregon State, which was... I don't know. I had the orange glasses on there.
Yeah.
And then, but, your Utah pick set the table for me to go with Washington. That single-handedly, I mean, unblemished, right? That 13 wins right there. That swung it in the end.
Well, because Utah was 7 Utah was 8-4 this year.
Right. So if we flip those two teams,
that hurts.
But Arizona was great for me. Wazoo started out great. It could have been a landslide.
When Colorado and Washington and Washington State, Oregon and Oregon State were all in the top, and USC were all in the top 25.
They all started out 3-0. Yeah.
You know what? If it was a 16-game season, I think I would have come back.
You lost this one, but you said you had a pretty magnificent fantasy football win this week.
Okay, did you watch the game last night?
Parts of it. I saw what mattered.
Okay, so and you can turn this part off. It'll be about 1 minute and 30 seconds of fantasy football.
It's 2 of the fast forward 30-second buttons.
We do a 2-week playoff for our fantasy football.
Wow, okay.
It's a bunch of college friends. It's about year 12. 4 teams make the playoff, and
cutthroat.
It's cutthroat. I was down, basically going into the final 2 drives of the game. I was out of players. I was down by 1 point, and he had Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts gets picked off like midway through the 4th quarter. That's -2 points. I go up by 1 point. I'm feeling great. The Seahawks are driving. Hold on. The Seahawks are driving too well. There's too much time left on the clock. They're scoring touchdowns. Philly's going to get the ball back. Philly gets the ball back. First play, Jalen Hurts rushes like 15 yards. He gets a 1.5 points. But he goes back up in front of me by a point, or by like 0.5 points now. I'm devastated. The group chat's going nuts. They're throwing the ball.
What does he do?
They're throwing the ball. Why are you throwing the ball? That's into coverage. It's picked off. I'm back up. Tyson wins. Greatest win in the league is called the Stafford. Greatest win in the Stafford history.
That is uncanny.
Yeah.
Not an NFL podcast, but I don't get the Jalen Hurts hype. All the 2-3 weeks ago, before they went on this losing streak, right after they beat, who was it? They beat Buffalo. Weird game where they shouldn't have won. All the big faces, both whom I respect and whom I don't really respect as much, were like,
take me through that list.
oh god. But no, everybody was like, no, behind Mahomes, there's no one I trust more than Hurts. It's like, really? Like I don't watch a ton of ball these days.
I think there's no offensive line I trust more than Philly's.
I mean, you see it all over Twitter. It's like Jalen Hurts when he's not getting pushed in the ass by a 400-pound lineman. It's just like some meme or something. All right, well.
Well, anyways, I would like to congratulate you on your win. Do you have any preference for where we go for a meal?
We'll figure that out after the pod.
Okay, cool.
A minute on hoops, and then we'll get into our awards.
Yeah.
Did you watch the Syracuse game?
I didn't, but I saw the score, and go figure, they were missing another player due to injury.
Yes. Keyshawn was also out, so they were down 4 opening night starters. And yet, it's still a lineup that you look at. It's not a poverty lineup. It's not like they're throwing 3 non-scholarship players out there, right?
Right.
Like they were at times last season. But yet, and I'll probably write a story about this, they're shooting 39% from 3 on the year before that game, essentially, after shooting 31%. That
was like Shane Hoffman's biggest key to this season was whether or not Dana Altman's team can actually shoot the 3-point.
Turns out it matters.
Yeah.
And then you
get 3 points for those, and then the other ones you just get 2 points for those.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. So then you look at it, they shot 3 of 20 on threes against Syracuse, and they got ran out of the gym, and it's not surprising. And that being said, if you look at the Pac-12 standings, I know they haven't started Pac-12's play yet, but not a lot of great teams.
Do you know who's won some games actually? Oregon State.
Oregon State's won some games.
I'm not saying they've won good games, but we're grading on a curve here.
We are.
Yeah.
Arizona looks like they will be a Final Four team.
Yeah.
They just keep doing it. Colorado has some interesting guys. Utah and Washington State have started well. UCLA and USC have not been good.
Yeah.
So
which is interesting because they're coming through Eugene next week.
Right. Are you going to go to those?
I'm going to go to the USC game.
Okay.
See a little Shellstad versus Bronny action.
That'll be a good one. Just for storyline purposes.
Yeah. Well, I think it'd be. I think the I-5 corridor should be at the first.
Yes.
Final Pac-12 men's basketball game of the season.
Shellstad looks great, but he can't be the only guy. They shut him down after a hot start against Syracuse.
Yeah, man, you can't have I think he's going to be better than Peyton Pritchard. I also don't think that you can have a 6-foot freshman guard being the guy who carries an entire freaking basketball
I know
team.
we've surpassed our hoops minute, but I was out at Westland High School covering their season opener the other night. They have another one.
Mm-hmm.
Who absolutely watched Shellstad. He looks faster than Shellstad looked.
Does he have a name?
Yes, he does. Pat Viavla. Maybe junior? PJ Viavla?
Viavla.
Yeah, it kind of...
Ooh,
at first it sounds weird, but then it starts to flow.
Now imagine Joey McMurray saying that.
Viavla
corner
for 3. Yeah.
Bang! Does he do a bang?
I don't think he does a bang. So they just keep pumping him out. But, the last thing... they should get some guys back soon. I know not Dante yet, but if they can add a big man, it's if you're missing those threes, maybe you start going inside, or maybe you're getting offensive rebounds, and there's it's kind of 3 or bust right now with this team. And I do wonder if, because they're shooting better when the big men get back, if Altman is now thinking, well, maybe it's still going to be a little bit of an outside in offense. Who knows? I hope they get healthy because it's not the most amazing watch all the time.
It's not an amazing watch, but I think if you were to grade the this non-conference versus past ones, even though there's not a signature win or this or that,
they look better.
Again, as we've said a couple of times already, there are excuses for why they should have done worse these last couple months. And Oregon, the last couple of years, has often used those excuses.
I just hope there's stuff to write about this winter.
I think there will be.
And with that being said, this is usually when we probably have a sponsorship read maybe. However, we don't have one. We're hoping maybe Alaska Airlines comes through in the next year.
Yeah. We're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to come back with our Pac-12, or no, sorry, our I-5 corridor 2023.
Maybe that's why the sponsors don't think you could read a sponsorship ad perfectly.
Because I can't even do them for my own. Yeah,
Right.
yeah. All right, and we're back. It's awards time. I texted you a couple days ago.
Yesterday.
Yeah, yesterday. Why don't we actually do some prep for this podcast? Let's do something fun. Let's do some awards. So I sent you like a list of, 2023 Duck of the Year, 23 Beaver of the Year, 23 Story of the Year, and I just wanted to kind of get like some of your general thoughts.
Absolutely. A lot of conversations can be had around these
Yeah,
topics.
so I think we should just open up and go straight into it. Who would Shane Hoffman consider to be the 2023 Oregon Duck of the Year?
So I think it's two candidates.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I'm kind of closed-minded when it comes to this one. I think it's Rob Mullins, or I think it's Bo Nix.
Okay.
I think had Dan Lanning had his Ducks beat Washington one time, he would have had a case. I look around, I don't see many other sports that maybe the baseball team has a case there for Coach Waz perhaps, but for Rob Mullins to navigate Oregon to the Big Ten and get out, when they got out,
Right.
important. He did hire Dan Lanning. I know it's a this year award.
Yeah.
So that's obviously one, and then Bo Nix, I'm sure we'll talk more about. But those were my two candidates. Do I need to pick one right now?
No, you don't actually, because my candidates were going to be Bo Nix as well. That was one of those seasons for Oregon quarterback. There's only been 4 Heisman finalists in Oregon history. He's one of them. He was the right player at the right time for a program that was left in the dark yet again by another football coach. We're going to see next year how much of this was Dan Lanning versus Bo Nix, but I think a very large part was I think a large part of the success was Nix's overall just complete welcoming of everything Oregon. Like, he was a really good ambassador of the program for the 2 years he was there.
Player coach kind of deal.
Yeah.
It sounds so cliche, but
so I was going to nominate him. I thought about Mullins. I think that's huge for them as well. But like along those same lines, I was going to say Phil Knight, because if it wasn't for the 2 decades of
how many
him,
does he have at this point? 70
actually, this would be I think the sixth in a row. He didn't get 2015. He knows why. But yeah, I just think for Oregon to have positioned itself to be in a spot to get to the Big Ten, to be amongst UCLA and USC and Washington and not get left behind, a large part of that has to do with just the hundreds of millions of dollars Knight has invested in the program over the last 2 decades. Like, I know it's something that Beaver fans like to be like, oh, the only reason you're there is because of Phil Knight, and it's like, yeah, so. It's just like every school has kind of mega donors, and Oregon's has really gone to bat for them time after time, and it's gotten them to a point where they're not going to get kind of left behind in this next thing. Do
they get a football title before he dies? Go.
We don't talk about such morbid things here. Yes, I believe so. I think with the base of level talent that the Ducks are accruing, the success that they've had in the transfer portal, where they are going to be able to have access to potentially the best players in the country, they're going to be in the playoff next year. They're going to, I think, with the expansion. I don't know how many years Phil's got left. He's getting up there. I think he's 87, but also he's probably going to afford pretty good doctors. So I think we have an agreement, though.
Please.
We're going to give it to Bo Nix.
All right, there it is.
I think he started the year on billboards. We can market that.
He was better this year. He was really fantastic this year. You said a lot of the brand kind of gravitated around him. We'll probably bring him up moving forward in this podcast.
Well, and it's just even little things like, and I'm sure there's more to this than just the goodness of his heart, but just playing in the bowl game. I think this was
we didn't talk about that, but that's going to be kind of like sounds like Bucky's playing too, so a little bit of a song for that duo. Yeah. Troy will not be, or has he not decided
not
yet?
Positive on that one.
Yeah.
All right. Well, congratulations, Bo Nix.
Hope he's listening.
Your 2023 Oregon Duck of the Year. Who's your 2023 Oregon State Beaver of the Year, Shane?
It's a funny one, isn't it?
Yeah. The I-5 Corridor's Beaver of the Year award goes to.
I have two candidates. One is more of a shout out than, one's more of a shout out. First one, Trent Bray.
Mm-hmm.
Their defense wasn't amazing this year, but it was good, and it does seem like he's been warmly received since taking over.
I agree.
They've lost some key players in the portal, not unexpectedly so. But they're hosting guys like Malik Murphy from Texas. He was at PDX Airport getting picked up to go down to Corvallis. They've gotten some other interest from guys, and they've also brought in some guys. So it seems like he's doing a good job, and it seems like a lot of the roster liked that hire. The other one is just, shout out Scott Ruick. I don't know. His team's winning. I think they're one of 15 undefeated teams in America right now. His
That's a good
basketball
one.
Team. 16 maybe?
And that's pretty big for them, especially coming off of last season, too.
Yeah. Which was a weird year for them. They were not picked high entering this year. They might still not be amazing, but they have some talent. They have a well-rounded roster, and amid all the bullshit around that university, he's just kind of put his head down and continues to do his thing, and he's nice. I like him. He's fun to talk to as well.
Do you know when Time Magazine does, like, their Person of the Year, and it's not always, like, somebody people like?
Yeah.
Like, it's just, like, whether this person was a dictator or blew up the moon or whatever. The impact that they had made them Person of the Year. It's got to be Jonathan Smith.
Well, I thought about that, but I was like, is that allowed?
It is now.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
I'm glad I didn't pick him then.
It's just he led Oregon State to a season that was nearly Cinderella-esque. Like they at least hung in to they hung in the discussion long enough for him to position himself well enough to get that Michigan State.
They fought back after it looked like they would.
Yeah, it was a season where Oregon State rallied when it seemed like everyone in college football was against them. And I think Jonathan Smith was the right person to lead them through that. I think he was the person that got the most success out of them for that. Like, we thought that they were a quarterback away from being, like, really good. I think you and I will both say, like, DJU wasn't quite the exact quarterback we were thinking. Like, he was effective, but, like, also he was...
I've gone back and forth on this one because if you look at his numbers, best of his career, and like good numbers, I just think like watching Bo Nix all year.
True,
It really
point.
changed the way I felt like unfairly viewed the other quarterbacks I would watch. Where like when you turn on DJU, you flip the channel and it's like, oh, you couldn't complete it on 3rd and 15, dude.
All right.
He missed some big throws. He made some big throws. I think he was good enough. I don't think he was, and we'll get into this, good enough to lead him to the playoff.
But I will say, though, Bray was able to get a lot out of not the highest rated talent yet again on that defense.
Yeah.
And the fact that, like, he positioned himself as, I'm not going to get on that jet. Like, I'm not going to Michigan State. I'm going to stay here and be a part of this. Obviously he knew more about what Oregon State's future looked like than the public did at the time, because it was just like, why would you take that job? There's no schedule. There's no, you just don't know anything.
Schedule's still not great. They would need to go.
Yeah, I think
11,
I feel confident in agreeing with you and going Trent Bray.
Okay.
Congratulations, you are the I-5 corridors.
You know what is sad about this all, though?
Beaver of the year.
And they're still recruiting and getting guys, right? The sad thing is that despite it expanding to 12 teams, given their schedule, they need to go 11-1 to be considered.
Yeah, 100%.
Moving on.
All right, our next category, Shane, is
Play of the year.
Yeah, do you have a good one for that?
I have one that came to mind. There's probably so many that should be on here. It's the Knicks' throw to Troy against Oregon State. The crossbody rolling out.
Nah, that's the one that I was going to pick too.
Good. That seems like if it's the first thing we both thought of, that's the play of the year.
Well, I was switching between that and because with that you think of that play represented a lot of things. It was a big moment by a big player in a big game. One of the best plays we saw him make, it's kind of similar to the way that you still talk about the hurdle Mariota did in the 2014 game against Oregon State.
Kind of antithetical to a lot of the people. What we're preaching is downsized for him and just kind of checking down and stuff like that.
Yeah, so I quite like that one. I was also thinking about the the baseball walk-off win back in the postseason.
We have game of the year coming up.
Yeah, I have a TikTok play of like the final version of that when I scroll through my things, and it's like, man, that was Oregon baseball. Like, yeah, actually, we'll save this for later. But yeah, play of the year we'll give to Bo Nix, just throttling a throw to Troy Franklin across.
Everyone knows what we're talking about.
Yeah.
That's a good sign. Like any other ones that come to mind, it's just there's so many big plays in a season like that. I can't think.
So here I was going to say, like, from the last year, and we're talking about calendar year, so it's kind of like including the spring in this. Like, is this the least memorable stretch of Oregon basketball that you can remember? Like, I can't really think of.
Well, since I've gotten to the West Coast, it might be least memorable stretch.
I mean, just like when you think of like this team in this era and like moments.
Well, if you throw the women's team in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, probably. I want to talk about Shellstad later, but the game winner he hit. Yeah, I can't think of another football play. I'm sure there was a few Bucky plays, but he made so many of those crazy make everyone miss plays that it's like, can you even pick one? So I think that's the right choice.
Well, and Bo had a couple like other like circus ones too.
He had a few. Oh, you know what else comes to mind actually? Now that I think about it, and he had 2 or 3 in this game. But the one against Cal, where he ducked under the blockers and then just rifled one, that was a pretty spectacular play. And Tez Johnson had a few too. Oh, and then the Bassa pick against Texas Tech.
You know what would have been a very good candidate for this would have been the touchdown they took away from Jackson Powers Johnson after Bo Nix fumbled it, and it was like I wrote like 3 graphs worth of like scene lead for that one, because it was like Bo was on the ground, he was like pointing to the ball, and to like
people are already commenting on the live stream we've got going if he was a snub for Duck of the Year.
Really? Jackson Powers Johnson, really?
Should he have been considered?
You know, that's fair, because he is the first Remington Award winner in program history. He's a guy who, I think of all of the people that could be nominated and win it, I think Jackson would probably be proudest to win Duck of the Year.
He also...
Like that guy's been, like, all in on the Ducks since, like, he was recruited by, like, Cristobal. Like, he was, like, one of those ones that was, like, we're recruiting other guys on Twitter.
He played multiple positions.
Yeah.
And then,
good interview.
Simply in football terms, at his position, nobody else is as good as they are. Like, he's either the best center in the nation or a top 3 one. I mean, and he won the award. He'll probably be taken as the first or second off the board.
Man, I'm glad. This is why we do this on the live stream. Thanks, chat.
Thanks, chat. Shout out, chat.
Shout out, chat. Oh man, can we do like a little tandem thing? Like, I think they'd be like fun at sharing the awards, like Bo and JPJ. Nah, this was the Bo Nix year.
Just the Bo Nix year.
Yeah. All right, what's our next category?
Story of the year.
Story of the year. This is big picture. Like, if you were to tell people, like, what was the story of 2023?
Yeah.
What is it?
Regrettably, realignment.
Yeah.
I don't even want to talk about it anymore. The other ones that would be in consideration are, transfer portal becoming free agency and quarterbacks becoming, high paid free agents. I don't know what else would be in consideration.
I mean, there were so many that like were nearly there. Like the Bo Nix Heisman thing was nearly there.
Course.
Oregon's playoff run was nearly there.
Yeah. No, that's good. I didn't even think about those because they died.
Yeah, I do think just it's got to be realignment, because this is what has dominated sports talk for the entire last year,
and what we'll talk about all summer and fall.
Because it's, I mean, you could make a case for both schools. It was the story of the year too. I mean, like it's gonna be so fun to just watch all the fallout of what happens with the Pac-12, especially now with like the court rulings where like Wazoo and Oregon State get control of everything. Like it's.
Can we do a quick tangent real quick?
Yeah, go for it.
Real quick. With Oregon, Washington, and the LA schools going to the Big Ten, those schools, because of their West Coast origins, are always going to be linked, especially the next few years, despite them being in a new conference. We'll be comparing them a lot. Take out UCLA for a variety of reasons. When you look at Oregon, Washington, and USC, mostly football, but holistically as like an athletic department and just kind of a university, you'd probably say Oregon's the best positioned, right?
Yeah.
If you look at next year and the next few.
Yeah.
There's a real argument between Washington and USC. I'm curious if you have thoughts on it, because I was just thinking about that on the drive over here.
I think USC is currently standing as better positioned just because of it. People still think like, it was the same thing when Washington's AD left, when Linda Cohn left, or sorry, is that her name?
No, Jen Cohn.
Jen Cohen. Sorry, I apologize, Jen. Linda Cohen. What is this?
She's listening also.
Sports Center. I mean, you could just see that in her leaving Washington to go to USC. But obviously, a lot has changed since then because her hire that she made at Washington has completely transformed that program with Kalen DeBoer. Like if they go out there and win a playoff game, I think it's a different conversation. If they go out and win the national championship, it's a completely different conversation because I think I've said this before, but I think part of like what worked so well for Oregon during its dominant stretch in the Pac-12, like the early 2010s, was the fact that not only was USC down with some of its sanctions, but it was also like Washington football was still trying to figure out what the heck it was. They were coming out of the Tyrone Willingham era. They were the only winless team in the entire conference. Like that has long been a sleeping giant. But when you talk about like premier cities on the West Coast, Seattle is one of them, and it's growing. And like if you throw in like think about how many like the 12 fan signs you saw before the Seahawks won the Super Bowl. It wasn't a whole lot, and now they're everywhere. You drive anywhere in Washington and you see those all over the place. Like that's a city that really likes football, and I think if they think that they're among the nation's best, like there's a lot of room for that to grow. Whereas like I think if you're talking about like the percentage of the fan base that's engaged, like I think Oregon's tops of that. I think Oregon is at the tops of that, will remain at the tops of that. I just don't know like how much growth there is to like Oregon stealing there.
Did you do anything different before we pod today that you could replicate moving forward? You're on fire today.
I just feel focused.
Yeah, right. That was excellently said. I think there's so much star power across the athletic department at USC, even without Caleb Williams now. They get Will Howard from Kansas State, a great transfer portal quarterback. They also just keep losing guys. I could easily see them like kind of like struggling with the jump to the Big Ten football wise, like physicality wise.
Oops.
Their hoops team like was supposed to be good, not great. The women's team has a lot of potential. Washington like their hoops are so irrelevant, and it like doesn't really seem like it matters. They get another quarterback. It looks like they could keep one or two of their receivers. And I like DeBoer is a good coach. Like he just is. It seems like. I mean, it's gonna be different next year without Penix. Like they'll have to run a different offense.
It's fascinating to. This will be a post that I probably do later in the week. It's just post signing day, like heading into the Big 12, like comparing the rosters and recruiting footprints of Oregon versus Washington, because that's kind of. That's the one thing that I do like about where this rivalry is at right now is like Oregon's biggest thing going into next year is like, can you beat Washington? Like I know there's a lot of questions around the other things, but like that's
and they both reloaded and say this like the new quarterbacks,
right?
Yeah, it's a really good rivalry. That's why it's gonna be fun to see how they're linked moving forward. And that was a more fun spin on realignment than we could have done there. But I think we should move on.
Yeah, I think we should move on. The 2023 I-5 Corridor Publication of the Year for the second year in a row. We're going to give that to the I-5 Corridor. Wow. Congratulations, everybody. Woo! The 2023
Story of the Year. We doing that one next?
Oh yeah, all right. Yeah, this is like a white elephant. You get to say what your favorite story of mine was for the year, and I get to say my favorite story of yours for the year. I'm going to start out. Your Ricky Bella story was awesome this year.
Thanks,
like that was, if people didn't read that one, it was back in August, I believe. Shane
September, I think actually.
Maybe September.
Might have even come out in October. Who knows?
Shane had kind of approached me with the ideas of like wanting to do like more than sports and potentially also like incorporating some more multimedia. And I had mentioned that like there was a chef on Twitter that I thought was fascinating, and within like 2 hours you had already like talked to him and set up a interview, and it was about Ricky Bella, who's the chef at Palomar down in Southeast. Really cool story. I thought it moved quickly, kind of took you behind the scenes. It was kind of exactly what I like in I-5 corridor stories. So congratulations, Shane, on the Shane Hoffman 2023 Story of the Year.
Wish I'd done more of that stuff.
Yeah.
It's hard to find that kind of thing. And then,
it's hard in football season because you get into like such like a weekly like what's the next opponent, like what's the theme of this week, that you kind of forget that like with those stories, you realize that like it seems like such a daunting effort, but that it's really just like one day, and like you can turn that around too. And so it's just like that doesn't have to be like this big like.
It worked really well.
Yeah.
I want to do more stuff like that maybe in the off season, and find places to publish those even if it's not the I-5 corridor. Cool. Well, on your sports Substack, my non-sports story.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, boy, no wonder we're climbing the charts.
Well, I have 3 honorable mentions for you, or 3 mentions for you.
Okay.
So I came more prepared in that regard to shower you with praise.
Oh, I thought you were coming with like 3 other stories that you wrote.
No. That would have been funny.
Yeah.
Though. It's like we weren't just doing me.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought your little mailbag intro on your grandpa was fantastic.
Oh, thanks. I like that one too.
For a lot of reasons. And then 2 other ones. I mean, I think it was a very consistent year from you. The first Washington game, I thought was nice. It captured us trying to move around on the sidelines.
Yeah.
There was some. I liked the tone too. You had that landing quote of like, "This game is entirely on me," and then you said something like, "Well, glad we've settled that debate because Bo Nix was good enough to win,"
right?
That kind of stuff. And then the third one was, I miss. I don't know if I miss. I just you don't cover as much basketball these days for obvious reasons, but I always enjoy reading your basketball stuff, and I thought that if Dana Altman's Ducks aren't showing up, why should he expect the fans? That kind of game column that you did when you did go down there, that was a good story.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I would like to write more hoops this season, so Ducks maybe get healthy. I was going to say, just like circling back though, your gamers got a lot better this year too. Like I was even just like going back and reading first week of the season, the Portland State one, the 546 push-ups by the Duck. Like it was just some nice flair this year. I feel like one thing you improved on a fair amount this season is you're not overriding things quite as much, and I mean that as like a sincere compliment, because that's a thing that's really hard to get over. Your flow this year was much smoother, especially in first drafts coming through.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I think this year I did less of at least for you, I did less of the blowout features. And I think that was a good thing. Because I think I looked back too, through all of our stuff to try to find some stuff to nominate for you. And I think all my game stories ended up turning out really well and captured the moment well and didn't fall victim to like what's the word? Hyperbolizing them.
Yeah, well, and it's so easy to spot that out too, because then you can go back and like read a season's worth of stories, and maybe one where I did that a little bit this year was after the Texas Tech game, where Oregon struggled a bit in that game, and I think like my like closing line was like, Oregon can still get to where it wants to go, but it's going to be a bumpy ride. And that might have actually been true, like in terms of like the large picture and looking at how it ended. But for much of the year, like Oregon just like thumped teams.
Yeah.
Like they were.
That was a weird game looking back.
Yeah.
It's like unrecognizable now. But yeah, I was gonna say I struggled mightily writing some of those stories, like in a way that I don't. I mean, it's like when I go and cover these preps games to Oregonian, like it's late at night, so sometimes it's a struggle to just get my thoughts together. But I kind of just pick something and go, and helps when you're covering high school football or basketball. It's just a little easier. You don't have to. Right. It doesn't have to be as big of a deal. So I think I convinced myself at times during the season, I was like, damn, like maybe I'm not that good at game stories. Like maybe I need a lot more practice. I think it's just like capturing the right type of style for your site. It's a good challenge.
Yeah, it's and I mean, this is gonna sound stupid, but like I struggle to find my style for my own site sometimes too, because like I'll put some parameters on like what should be a story, and it's like sometimes it doesn't need to be so cut and dried, or it doesn't have to be. Yeah,
I'm still trying to find the line too, where a lot of things I'm writing for you are very different, and I sometimes spend even more time on them just to find that right voice. But during the season, I'm busy and like not always good about reading a ton of stuff, and I read all your stuff, and I don't want to mimic your style, but I want to have it in the style that it makes sense to follow with the site. And I still haven't found my writing voice, but I still haven't found the right kind of way to balance that. And I think just as a whole, I'm trying to take things less seriously and write less dramatic, because I look back sometimes like, damn, like why did it have to be that big of a deal? It doesn't mean I'm a better writer to write it more dramatically, especially with prep stuff.
Yeah. All right, we're going to close this out with the I-5 Corridor Curse of the Year.
We're skipping Game of the
Year.
No,
sorry. We have Game of the Year.
And Best Thing We Ate.
Oh, man.
And we didn't even talk about Best TV Show we watched, although that'd be an obvious answer.
I didn't put that on the... Yeah, that's going to be Succession.
Yeah, I was going to say, there's no debate there. All right, so
I really feel like the podcast has gone downhill since we haven't had Succession to build.
I know, we have to find something new.
Yeah. All right, game of the year, go.
I have 2. That first Washington Oregon game.
Yeah.
That's just a classic game. That's everything you want from a game. As close as this last one was, and the stakes, like on paper, were higher.
It was a different game.
Different game. It didn't feel.
The first one felt like two heavyweights like swinging at each other, and this one felt like
they were lower ranked teams.
Yeah.
And yet it felt more. It felt bigger.
Yeah. Yeah. That was a massive game. I think that was the game.
It delivered in every way you'd want. And it didn't have like it didn't have the 20-3 stretch for Oregon where it's like, is this going to be like an ugly game?
Yeah.
It got out of hand briefly, but it was a great game. The environment in Washington, goosebumps. Like, I still think about that. That was fun. Very captured by that moment.
That was a fun day to do our jobs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then just that Shellstad game winner. It was a great all-around game, capped off by just a magnificent moment that feels like a moment that will be people like
it'll be referenced down the road. I'm good with going Washington game of the year there.
Any other?
The first college baseball divisional round game against Oral Roberts where they came back from, I think it was 9-1.
Yeah, that was the only game I watched, and I was like, this is kind of fun.
Yeah, I went down for that, and it was just. Again, as I said earlier, like it's few and far between like the days where the baseball stadium there is like really like thriving and bumping. But when they get like the special sauce right there, and it's like good weather, it's late in the year, and it's like games that people care about, like PK Park can be like freaking electric. And that was like one of the cooler, like completely unexpected from my point of view, just moments of the year for me. Like I didn't think that like Oregon baseball would get back to a point this quickly where it was competing in those type of super regional games at home. And
like any of these teams, if they win, if they're ranked, if they play in the postseason, the fans will come. And that goes back to the Altman thing. Like, dude, like they're not coming because you guys haven't been good, and that's not necessarily your fault. But if you don't have a number next to your name, and you don't have like star players playing because of injuries, like why would you expect fans to not smoke weed every night in their dorms and like to walk over and watch games?
Like the formula hasn't changed in like your 12 years here.
Right. Success still drives interest.
Thing you ate or place you ate of the year.
We're sipping the curse. Like you're all over the place, man.
Well, I mean,
let's finish with the food. That seems like a natural transition. Okay, so about to get lunch.
Okay, I have corridor curse of the year.
So, I think we got better this year.
I do actually agree.
Like it was like the bad take list we had last year was we did a draft.
Do you think we were too influenced by our previous bad takes to really go out on a ledge this year?
I generally think it was the type of coverage. It was less like
this guy could be amazing,
or like this guy had one good game. Like we worried about that with Bryce Betcher.
Yeah. And
then he ended up having a good season, and we just didn't do. Either of us didn't do a lot of those types of stories this year, and it's easier when there's like more big picture stuff to talk about. Right. The unfinished business for the Williams brothers thing, it wasn't like a bad take or really a curse because like Evan had such a good season, but the fact that I led with like Bennett like not realizing the spiral of a Penix throw and like a big moment.
Oh my God, yes.
And then like Evan was in position to make a game sealing pick.
That's so good.
And it just looked like he didn't see the ball.
Yeah.
And then that was the one that Polk jumped up between two guys. Like, yeah, it's tough. I love those guys. I love trying to both of them. And that was a tough one. So I don't know if that's a curse. It's definitely not a bad take. And then the only other ones, I think they're not curses as much as just bad takes. I was really heavy on like what's Oregon's thing.
Yeah.
And
I was right there with you too. But I remember on this podcast of you being very assertive. Like this was like a really well baked point.
Yeah, and it was mostly my own. I felt good about it, and it turned out, you could make the argument they didn't need a thing, or the argument was that Bo Nix was their thing, or the defense getting better,
or like everything was their thing.
The balance was their thing. But I would have pointed to other teams for the balance. I think
I still don't know what their thing was though.
Yeah, exactly.
Because they beat a team they lost to a team that had a thing.
Right.
Yeah.
And then lastly, I picked USC first in the draft, and like my thing for them was like, how could the defense be worse?
Yeah.
And it was worse.
My curse is like it's not that bad in like the large scale. I'm gonna go with because these were supposed to be like bold predictions
Right.
early in January. I picked Oregon State to make the playoff.
It read more like you thought there was a route.
Right, like yeah, and it was like my route was like, hey, the 2 games that this team lost last year were because of bad quarterback play. Decent quarterback play
Makes
wins
sense.
those 2 games. I think the thing that I probably undersold a little bit is how freaking impressive it was for Oregon State to win 10 games like the year before. Anyways, like take
Yeah.
like take the quarterback out of the equation. Like Oregon State's just doesn't have the talent, even with Jonathan Smith, to expect to win 10 games year in year
In
out.
a better conference this year.
Exactly.
But it wasn't like you were like, okay, 2023 college football
Right.
Semifinals, like Michigan, Georgia, Texas, and Oregon State.
Right. Yeah. It was just like I think that the Pac-12 could be complicated again, and I think there could be a route. That being said, I really wish I wouldn't have written that one just because it kind of handcuffs you at certain times. Because like the corridor wants to have some value to our word, and it was by like March where I was like, I think the Ducks are going to be a lot better than the Beavers this year, and they were by quite a bit. But thankfully we just gained so many new subscribers this year that like most didn't read that I thought that Oregon State was going to make it. So,
and then there's the Bucky one.
The Bucky one I don't hate as much because like the dude still averaged like 6.5 yards per carry.
Right? It certainly wasn't that.
Yeah, because he was like 6.5 yards per carry. He finished at 1,200 yards. I said he was going to get to 15. You give him like 4 more carries a game.
Yeah. Was there any? This is a little bit different, but were there any players like 2 years ago? It was like Byron Cardwell, like he's gonna lead the running back rotation. Was there any players like that where like he's gonna have a huge role this year, and then not that it was just us pushing that? But
so like what we thought like Dante Thornton the year before.
That's another one. There was a few of those. I'm trying to think. This year, I think we were a little bit tamer with that.
Yeah, boy, like the running back position specifically, as you talked about, that's what got us the year before because it was Byron Cardwell, Seven McGee.
We didn't fall victim to the offensive line debate much. We mentioned it, but certainly weren't parading.
I wrote a off-season profile on like Justin Jacobs, and his role would have been larger if he wasn't injured for the first half of the season,
and was good when he played. I think I not vocally on the podcast or in Reddit.
I did a Roderick Pleasant thing, and he didn't play nearly as much. Oh no, I know what it is. I know what got corridor cursed.
Well, I before you do yours, because this is not really a curse, but I didn't realize Bossa was going to be as good as he was.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Go ahead though.
I did like the Q&A with Camden Lewis at the start of the season,
man.
And like the intro to the Q&A was just like, we've moved beyond like the worry part, so like that, like this story doesn't feel like it should be like the Camden Lewis is still, because it had been like 2 years of him being Oregon's best kicker.
He went so downhill after that Washington game,
and I think it was all mental, man.
Yeah,
like,
of course.
like it's I feel
Don't blame
I would not encourage anyone to be a kicker ever. Like maybe if that's your ride to a scholarship, but if you can be that talented at one thing, be a journalist. Like
Did you see? Who was it Western Kentucky? It was some kicker the other day that had never attempted an in-game kick and hit the game winner, and they panned him before, and he was like head against the wall doing breathing exercises, and I just thought that was like dope. I mean, it worked because he made it, but yeah, I mean, maybe work on some breathing techniques.
So sorry, Camden. That's my bad.
Good year though.
Yeah, good year.
A bat of saving. Well, if you listen back to some podcasts, I'm sure we could pinpoint.
Well,
some.
I mean, like ultimately, the corridor curse was me thinking that Oregon was a playoff team and getting my hopes up that like the corridor was going to start making playoff money.
Yeah.
But again, alas.
Again, they could have been.
Yeah, they could have been. We were close. Is it thing to eat of the year?
Sure, man. Yeah, you put this list together.
All right, cool. Well, I mean, look, like I've been throwing things out there, and you keep telling me I'm off topic.
I was going off the order you originally described.
All right, where's the best place you've eaten this year?
I really struggle with this. This is the one, of course, that I took the longest on. I'm not always good about marking down places I try, and I'm not always great about going to ones that are already on my list. There's so many good spots here. The one that just comes to mind in terms of like good food, good environment, like hard to get into, like Eam.
Yeah.
Really good. I went there 3 times this year, all this year. Like really solid. kind of represents everything Portland's about.
Yeah, and Eam is definitely, it's near the top of the list, if not at the top of the list of you have like a friend or whoever in town, or like your parents are in town. Like, where can I take them? I did, did that a couple weeks ago. It was great. Probably the place that I get takeout from the most.
That's right, because you skirt the line.
I skirt the line, and it packages up really well. You're not going to be surprised by this, but I'm going with a pizza place.
No way.
I'm going to Lombardo's Pizza on Lombard, of all places. They opened up back in like July. It's just this one guy who works in there, and he works his butt off, and he talks to you the entire time.
Is it a small hole in the wall?
It's a small hole in the wall place. I believe it used to be a laundromat. The guy moved over from New Jersey, I think, recently. It's just very homey. It's very comfortable, and the pizza is the best I've had in the city. And I've had some pretty.
What makes it so good in your
the sauce is like bright but complex. It's a very thin crust. It's got the right proportions of cheese. Like, it's a good slice, you know, like when you think of, when you just think of, like, it's my favorite one there is their tomato pie, where they actually, it's a real thin. They put cheese on top and then ladle some of the marinara on top of that. And it's just delightful. And it's not like my other pizza place in Portland that I love is Ranch Pizza, which does that Detroit style pizza. But like, that's pizza that I feel really bad after eating, just because it's like, that's a meal. Lombardo's, like, you feel like you're satiated, like you're not like, if you're hungry, you're not gonna be still hungry afterwards, but like you're not completely weighed down.
And we're really missing the opportunity of some more food writing, aren't we? Just listening to you articulate your thoughts on this. I mean, there was you responded to it on Twitter. Someone put out their list of top pizza spots, and I think you argued that Lombardo should be on there, and it made me realize, like, it's an untapped market for me since I've moved here, and so maybe a New Year's resolution for me could be more pizza.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, for you in the corridor, what your New Year's resolution is.
That's a good thing.
As a reporter and an owner of a Substack, what is your New Year's resolution?
I think I'm going to just write a lot more. I think
any particular reason?
No, but I think the corridor got to a point this year where I either need to dive in with both feet or become a doctor.
Okay, I don't see that in your future.
And since I'm only 27 years old, by the time I become a doctor, I would nearly be in my mid-30s. So, and that would be depressing.
That would be depressing.
Oh my God.
Imagine that.
But honest to God, though, if you made it this far, we are going to be ramping up things on the corridor. I'm going to go all in on this thing and see how far into baseball season it will take us.
Could you imagine that your livelihood actually kind of depends on, like, a 7-foot center's health?
We'll see you guys next year. Thanks for listening, everybody.